Here's something that I would totally do if I had more time. I got all these ideas. I'm just gonna throw them out and go for it if you want, if you got time. So the normal format is you have this American song and it reaches the world, and these different foreign countries, they translate it into the language and they sing the language, and that's all well and good, and that's how, that's good. But we don't ever do the opposite. We don't ever go out and search these songwriters in Kenya or Korea or anywhere else and learn their song and translate it to English and use it. It might be gold. It might be just wonderful. Yeah. And I've got a playlist on my YouTube channel of, I haven't added to it for years, but of all these different nationalities of these songs that are not American songs that they've just like, we're translating this to English. It's their own style. So like, I love Bollywood. I don't like Bollywood movies because they're cheesy to me, but I love the concept of Bollywood movies. Everybody's dancing at the end. And there is this guy from India, it's a Christian guy, and so his worship song that was big, top 40, whatever, and I learned this from an Indian friend of mine later, that was like really big back in 10 years ago. He's like doing this dance routine, and all these people it's all coordinated, and it's the type of music that you would hear. Nachoonga, gaunga, paglon ke saman, hosh mein na rahunga, mera raja hai mahan. Nachoonga, khoke apna swabhiman, are log kahe is mulk ka pata hoonga, mera raja hai mahan. I love that song. And I would love to translate it to English and do it. I don't know how my congregation would feel about that song, because it's very like Indian flavor. But why don't we do that? So I'm gonna throw that at you and issue that personal challenge to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I try to do that when I can, but it is just really hard to find those songs. And then even if you find them, who's the person who's translating them and making them accessible? But I'm sure if I put more time into it, I could do it myself. But the only song I can think of that we, as an American church, actually use that wasn't written by an American is Waymaker. And most people actually think that Leland wrote it because that was like the first version that got super popular. But if you look in the copyright, I'm pretty sure it's a these are two very different things, so I'm very sorry. It's either a South African man or like a Korean man, but the name is like very difficult to pronounce. It's not Leland. And the funny thing, when I first heard this song, my church in Charlotte played it, and I could not find a version of it anywhere on the internet, like anywhere. And so for months, I was just listening to like the terrible recording we had from church. And then Michael W. Smith did a version with some amazing gospel vocalist. And then months later, Leland did a version, and it blew up. But everyone just assumes Leland wrote it, but that's the only one I can think of that people do.
That's amazing. I just looked it up as you were talking, and so it's a Nigerian gospel singer named Sinach, Sinach, maybe?
Yeah, I think Sinach.
Sinach?
It's how I've heard it pronounced before. That doesn't mean it's correct, but...
I'm going to have to look that up later, and might even fade it in right here during the production.
Hey, Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy, but I do think you're right. We don't do enough of those songs. I had a friend at my old church who was the only Black person I can think of that went to our church, and she was on our music worship team, and she would say, "Oh, I found this song, but I've got to white it up first." And it was very tongue-in-cheek, but it's also kind of true. And I try to do some gospel songs that are almost entirely white church. And I do have to kind of white it up a little bit. And I think it makes me cringe a little bit, but I think it also is honoring, you know, because if you think of the amount of money people make from our royalties of using their songs every week through CCLI gets the money and, you know, listening to it over and over again, and I buy the song to put it on Planning Center. Like, I think it's honoring to seek out different people's worship that isn't just Hillsong or Bethel or whatever. Choose your mega church of white people. Yeah. It's hard though.
I'm a big fan of bossa nova, and I just searched Oceans on bossa nova. There's a very good rendition, and the guy has, do you know that little instrument that looks like a little mini piano, but you blow into one end of it?
Oh, harmonic, what is that called?
I don't remember what it is. Sometimes
melodica.
They got the mouthpiece. Melodica, that's it. Yeah, and this one, he's got an actual like tube that goes from his mouth to the thing instead of just being attached. And just a phenomenal little bossa nova thing of
Oceans. That's cool.
So, yeah.
Wow, that song will never die.
No. So, number 6, the function and purpose of each instrument.
Yeah, so this, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just for the people, I, you know, when you write a book, they say to have in mind your target audience. And my target audience was this seemingly very dramatic example of a woman who was she was a accountant. And when I met her, it was during the big tax season. And so she's, you know, working 80-hour weeks and she's leading music worship. They haven't introduced a new song and I think it was actually something like 3 years, which is so sad. And it was the classic, you know, their worship leader quit and they asked her to do it. And it was like, she didn't know anything about the instruments. I was like I guest led for a Sunday and I taught the box drummer just like a simple idea and the bass player, you know, this is how you kind of, you know, playing the inversions even, they didn't know how to do that. And so just, I kind of have her in mind of like, you have inherited this music worship team and all you know is how to sing even. It's like, I think it's important to be able to just, even if you don't know how to play those instruments, you need to know how to talk to them. And I make this obnoxious joke in the book that probably doesn't go over well when you're reading it about how like it's the generic, you see memes of this all the time when the worship leader's trying to talk to the drummer and they're like, yeah, can you make a and the drummer's like, sure, whatever you say.
Yeah. I thought you were going to go for the video of when you have the wrong drummer in your worship band.
Oh, the Oceans one?
Oh, yeah, there's that one.
Yeah.
There's a couple of them, and the guy's going crazy when it's like a real subtle song.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I just think I do at this point know how to play functionally all of the instruments on a music worship team. And that's so helpful to me just to be able to say like, I love to drum. And I wrote the drum chapter and then sent it to my friend who's a phenomenal drummer and was like, tell me where I'm being an idiot, you know, of like, I think I misspelled cymbal and just kept putting like, you know, SY, like a symbol you draw or something. And so I got some of it qualified, but even just like being able to say to your tech booth of either your sound person or your slides person, like just being able to say to the sound person something really simple is like, hey, can you put a little reverb on my voice? Or like there's a little feedback, maybe turn down the gain, just knowing simple things. Like you can say to your drummer, I'll say to my drummer in between verses or something, if one of our drummers is super new to the music worship genre, like the way white people do it. And he will, you know, kind of stay on a hi-hat when you're at like the climax chorus, and I'll just be like, give me some ride. And, you know, he switches over to the ride cymbal and it makes all the difference. And so being able to do that instead of being like, hey man, you're doing like a I need a ka, you know, just it saves you time and it saves your drummer from wanting to punch you in the face. And so I put it's really simple. I'm sure the people who are reading it that are experts in those instruments are probably like, this is an oversimplified explanation of what I do, but that's kind of the goal of just being able to say like simple things of like the drummer and the bass guitar are connected. The bass the bass drum or the bass guitar is meant to follow the kick drum. If the kick is happening, the bass guitar needs to be playing a note, and you can play more notes than that, but you need to be on the kick. And so just simple things like that so that people know how to communicate with their band, even if they don't play those things. And talking to sound people is a whole different animal because, you know, a lot of churches also have a worship leader and they have a tech person, and that's great, but that's not that's not where my church is at. They're, I'm not even full time, so they're not about to also have a tech person on staff. So I've had to figure out what I can and teach volunteers what I can. And so it's helpful, but the goal is just like, you don't have time to go learn lessons on each of these instruments. So I was just trying to put succinct, like you're like succinct, you talk too much. How is it succinct? But I had an editor edit it down over and over again. So hopefully it's kind of succinct and helpful.
Nice. Can I have a free book? You want to send it to me?
Oh yeah. I'd love to send it to you.
I would really like to read this book.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I have a pile of mailing things that they've just been sitting in the garage, and I was like, I need to send those. The book came out 2 months ago, and I still haven't sent books to people. So,
okay.
But yeah, I'd love to.
Let's talk about something boring and then something funny. So
Great.
Number 7 is a crash course in music theory. Blah.
Yes.
No, I'm actually getting into it this year. I've done everything by ear for 25, 30 years. And there's just this year, I'm forcing myself to kind of try to understand some things so I can teach it to my students that are getting a little more advanced this year.
Yeah.
But it always I just don't like, it's a beast.
Yeah.
It's blah. But a little piece at a time, I'm getting it. It's cool. And then after that, you're going to tell us a funny story.
Yeah, so I wrote this chapter for everyone who thinks blah when they think music theory.
Awesome. That's why I want this book.
Yeah, good. So my disclaimer I give at the front of this chapter is first I start with please don't skip this. I know you want to skip this, but I promise it's super helpful. And I took 4 semesters of music theory in college, and
on purpose?
Or
did you lose a bet?
At the time I had to. By the time I graduated, because I had to change my major, I only got credit for one of them, and I was so mad. I was like, all of that work for nothing. But I took 4 semesters of music theory, and I used probably half of what I learned I used half of what I learned in one class. That's all I use. Ooh. It's a very small, I'm sure all of the other semesters help to solidify it up there, but the amount that you need for music worship is embarrassingly little. You can go really far with it and use, I'm sure, I've been in rooms where I'm like, look, I haven't studied that since I was a junior in college and I don't remember that anymore. Why are you saying that to me? But what you need to lead your team is not 4 semesters of music theory. I really tried to just put, it's 5 things that I really go into, and I really think that's all you need. And even sometimes when I'm teaching people how to find harmonies and stuff, I could use the really impressive language and talk about tonality and whatever, but I really will just say there's 2 harmony lines that go, and I'm trying to explain it without getting too deep in the weeds. But basically one harmony line is boring, and one harmony line is kind of echoing, mimicking the melody, just a third above or below. And so a lot of times with my students, especially, I'll just be like, you're being too interesting. You need to be more boring. And they'll be like, am I the 5th? And I'm like, yes, be boring. And they're like, great. Wow. And it's okay, that's all you need. You don't need to have, because I had to study for 4 semesters how to, they play a C and I need to be able to sing an E above it or an F or whatever. So I've got that in there, but I don't need it. So I'm sure it's helpful, but so I put, it's how to read chord sheets, which is super simple. It's really anyone who's never done it before can just pick it up and do it. Playing in a key, as when you're reading music, obviously the key signature is written for you on the left, but in worship music, you're just looking at chord shapes or chord letters. So it's much easier. I talk about what a chord means, how to make it up, which is really just easy to look at on a piano. There's a little picture of a piano in there. Time signatures. A lot of my drummers don't know what time signatures are, which is really, really interesting to me. Trying to kind of, and one of my drummers is mostly blind, so I can't even really draw it out for him. And that's the easiest way to learn it. Yeah, that's really challenging actually, is figuring out how to do that with a mostly blind guy, but he's the best, so it's totally worth it. But yeah. And then finding and sustaining harmonies, that's all. It's just harmonies and tiny, tiny little music theory, and it will totally transform your ability to talk to your team and help your team.
question. Do you get a separate set of music for your guitar players that want to use a capo, or do you say, nope, you got to tough it out, play all the bar chords?
I will never force somebody to play bar chords. I'm happy to give them a capoed version if they want. I use a capo when I'm singing because your girl is not able to lead a song, pay attention to the room, remember lyrics, which is like my nemesis. I have a terrible memory. And then also play an E flat bar chord. No, thank you. Just give me a capo. I'm not doing that.
Yep.
So, right, but if I'm, electric players usually don't use capos, and I think that makes more sense. But, if we have a new guy who's playing guitar and he just shows up with his capoed version, I'm like, great. I didn't print it for you. You just came with what you want to play. Super. Don't make me print it out in the middle of rehearsal, please. But he's showing up with what he needs. So, it's volunteers. We used to have a woman in our band who could only play in the key of G. And so she would be on like capo 5, capo 7. And
now you're in the mandolin territory. I mean, that helps if you want that kind of high. Yeah.
Yeah. So you do what you can.
Okay. Funny story.
So I tried not to tell this story in my book. I tried to say like, long story short, and my editor was like, you should tell this story. It would be awesome. So I think the funny story has to be an embarrassing story, right? So,
sure.
I told you I lived in Missouri for a year. I was doing college ministry out there, and my job was to kind of revamp the music worship team. And so it was almost the end of the year. I had started playing electric guitar for the first time, and I was playing electric for the song. And I had this like, I had learned the song during the week, and I was like, this is the best song I've ever heard in my life. It would sound really good in my vocal range. It would be so fun. Everyone's going to love it. And it was one of those songs that just immediately you're obsessed with, and I could not get over it. And so I didn't pray about it. I didn't ask anybody's opinion. And I said, we're going to do this song this week, last minute switch, because I wanted to do the song. There's so many levels of me and I didn't realize it at the time, but I just wanted to sound good. And I was just excited, and it was, whatever. And so we do this song, and I'm playing electric for like the third time in my life. And I'm trying to talk and introduce the song while tune my electric. And my tuner was not like a Boss tuner. It was like this off-brand tuner. And I'm trying to tune as I'm going, but I'm looking down and looking up and looking down and looking up. And I had not yet learned that you have to tune the tuning pegs a lot less for an electric than for an acoustic. And I wasn't really looking down to see what note they were making. And I didn't really know my guitar enough to be like, those are not the right notes. And I just kind of what I really should, it's like when you put your capo on the wrong capo and you try and just figure it out instead of stopping and fixing it. I feel like the first couple of times you just try and figure it out, and then you learn that it's just better to stop and restart, say sorry, and keep on keeping on. Mm-hmm. I didn't do that. And so I just tried to keep going, and there was a full band, and it was all my students. And we started the song, and my guitar was in who knows what tuning. And there was no acoustic guitar, and it was very like driven rock. And then I didn't play the entire song because I just couldn't do it. And so by that point I was just like, all right, cool. I'm just singing. And the drummer kept looking at me because, he's going crazy on this really hard song. And it was horrible. It was just, I was mortified. I actually can't even listen to the song anymore because I'm so embarrassed every time I try and think about it. And it was just, the whole band looked at me. They all stared at me the whole time. My students were like, you're an idiot. What's happening? And afterwards, I had to go to them all and be like, hey, I have immediately discovered that I did all of this in my own mind, and I did not ask the Lord. I didn't ask you guys. And the Lord humbled me immediately.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I always like to ask what you wish you would have known, maybe what you feel like this generation might need to know, any kind of words of wisdom that are your words or somebody else's words.
For music worship leaders, I think if I had to pick, it's hard. Everything is running through my brain. I just feel like we need to care more about the fact that we are also teaching our churches through what we're doing. It's not just music. It's not just a fun time. It's not just, the intro or I've had people say to me, your whole role as the music worship leader is just to support the pastor. And I think there's a huge part of that where we are to support the sermon, but we are not merely, meant to follow a theme. We are teaching through our songs. And so you really have to care about what those songs say, which means that you have to know the word. You have to be in relationship with the Lord and listen to the Holy Spirit. Pray before you pick songs. Please pray before you pick songs. It's so important to pay attention and that there's so much more gray area than we think there is in faith. I think that's, I don't know. It seems kind of random after that. It's not a gray area of biblical truth, but I think that, we decide either you're in a great place with the Lord or you're in a terrible place. And I think that gray area is where most of us live. And it's okay if all of your Sundays aren't beautiful and inspired and make you cry. You're still doing the Lord's work and worshiping him every week.
Amen to that. Well, Samantha, it's been wonderful talking with you today.
Same.
And we're going to put your link to your website, Facebook, etc., in the liner notes. So let me know what those are.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us on the Worship Leader Toolbox.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
'Cause I wanna start healing. Won't you heal me? You carry me through this world, 'cause I want to start healing. Won't you heal me?
This is such a long answer to your very simple question.
I do that all the time.